Now, the matrix is not new to Philips. We had people say to us in interviews, we've been working in a matrix for 50 years. What is different is that, at least in the recent past, you have not had a so-called balanced matrix. So if you think about it in terms of decision authority, the way this picture is to be read is that you have a sort of authority or power distribution on that vertical axis on the far left. And that line can be moved. The red line is sitting in the dead center. That represents where you're trying to get. A balance between having decision authority vested in a business unit that is global and a market, which is local. Not a new problem, not a new challenge. But many companies don't try to seek that center ground. They let the power be balanced toward one end or another. Your history, 20 years ago or more, clearly the balance was to the market side of that puzzle. And over this last 15 years or more, it worked its way, for good reason, to the global side of that scale, if you will. You, like most companies, are in the middle of a change process that we call the rebirth of the country manager. It's happening all over global companies, where the diminished role of countries and regions that were essentially turned into sales organizations, limited commercial organizations, are being rebuilt to be businesses. And that balancing, or that shifting of the balance, is a challenge. In your case, in this model, moving from left to right. You will still have businesses that will be primarily global and others that will be primarily local, but the critical mass is moving to the middle, and that is a difficult place to live. Those adjustments are made with tools like shifts in reporting relationships, defining decision rights, granting different controls for budgets, joint planning processes like BMC planning, and so forth. What it means on a practical level, and what you live with every day, is dual reporting. That the old idea of straight lines and dotted lines loses its value. Dotted lines and straight lines don't work in the balanced matrix because they imply that one party always gets the voting right on every issue. And that is not the way of today's complex strategies. In this model, leaders make decisions jointly for high-value, high-risk decision areas. And that's an important point by itself. Because what it implies is we have to learn to let go of a lot of issues from the old structure and concentrate our energy on those things that are indeed worth the time, the trouble, and the energy to make it a joint decision. Every partner in that matrix acts with full knowledge of the needs of the other. But, and this is a big point, and it's going to be a lot of what you're going to focus on this afternoon, in this balanced matrix, in this dual reporting structure, the puzzle that IBM and Procter & Gamble and a number of others who've mastered this art have learned is that when the joint parties cannot agree, you can't let the organization come to a stop. Someone has to make the call. But who does that varies by subject. Those things that have to do with a global product line need to have a golden vote, that tipping of the balance toward the global business. Those things that have to do with how I utilize my local advertising and promotion budget may very well tip the other way. So the real key to this thing is learning what those critical decision areas are and then sorting a handful of those kinds of decision rights, with the expectation that it is a kind of 49-51% partnership. The goal is to get it clear, but it will never be as clear as you want. It will always be ambiguous, and at the end of the day, people with good faith and judgment working together do have to sort these things out. Once we get some of these basic clarity themes defined, it will still require smart people working together with good relationships to work them through. Let's look at an example of how Nike decided to solve one of these sort of decision right issues in the 49-51% split. One of their biggest challenges was people decisions, hiring, firing, rewarding, paying, these kinds of things. What they decided was that the local business unit, call it the market, would get the 51% vote on setting the annual objectives of a given person in the matrix, completing their performance management, ratings, and deciding their merit pay decisions. 51%, that means they have to participate, they have to cooperate in the partnership with the global organization, but if they can't agree, the tipping vote goes to local on those kinds of issues, versus global gets the tip if they can't agree on who gets hired, who gets promoted into what roles, and how we manage career paths, because that's a global process in companies like Nike. There's actually a logic to the split. It's not arbitrary. The argument is that from a talent strategy point of view, a global oversight of key leaders is critical to managing a global talent pool. But when it comes to managing annual performance, the people on the ground know how the individual has performed and should have a stronger voice in those kinds of judgments. When they use the golden vote too often, however, in Nike, they consider that a failure. It should be collaborative whenever possible, and we're only going to spend our time spelling these things out on a handful of high-value decisions. We're not going to create pages and pages and pages of decision right documents, rules, things of that nature.